Welcome to Momentum Monday, where I take an idea from history, science, or math and turn it into something that you can use throughout your week. In the last episode of Math Science History, I talked about Diophantus, a mathematician who lived almost 2,000 years ago and changed the way people thought about numbers. What made Diophantus different was that he was not interested in numbers sitting alone. He was interested in the relationships between them. Diophantus did not simply ask, what is X? He asked, if X relates to Y in this way, and another condition is also true, what can we discover? He looked at the connections. He looked at how different pieces of information interacted to reveal a solution. That same way of thinking can help us better understand the relationships in our own lives. Every relationship we have is a complicated system with many different variables. Communication, timing, expectations, history, trust, and understanding. When a relationship becomes difficult, our first instinct is often to focus only on the other person. But what if we approached relationships the way Diophantus approached equations? This week's challenge is to choose one relationship in your life that feels stuck, confusing, or frustrating, and treat it like a mathematician would treat a problem. This relationship could be with a coworker, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a client, or a vendor you work with. And your goal isn't to fix the other person. Your goal is to understand the relationship better. So this week, let's focus on three things. First, observe the relationship. Second, question the relationship. And three, change one variable. So first, let's talk about observing the relationship. The first step is to slow down and notice the pattern. Mathematicians don't immediately try to solve an equation without first understanding the information that they have. They observe, they gather data, and look for patterns and relationships between different pieces of information. And we can do the same thing with the people in our lives. One thing I point out in last week's podcast is that Diophantus inspires us to ask why constantly. So when you're observing the relationship, ask yourself some questions like, when does this relationship work well? Why is it difficult? What happens right before the frustration begins? Maybe you think, my coworker never responds to my emails. But when you observe the pattern, you might discover something different. Maybe they respond quickly when you speak face to face. Maybe your emails are unclear. Maybe they are overwhelmed and dealing with their own challenges. Maybe they have a terrible boss. Or maybe the problem is not the person, but the interaction between the two of you. The first step is to observe the relationship. So before we try to change something, we have to understand what is actually happening. Psychologist Albert Bandura explored this idea through his research on social learning theory. And Bandura showed that humans learn not only through direct experience, but also by observing behaviors, noticing patterns, and paying attention to what happens afterward. And his work reminded me that awareness comes before change. It really does. Before we can improve a relationship, we first have to observe the patterns that are shaping it. All right, on to the second one. Question the relationship. The second step is to ask why, but not in a way that creates blame, rather in a way that creates curiosity. A mathematician does not become frustrated when a solution is not immediately obvious. Instead, they ask, what information am I missing here? They examine the conditions of the problem and consider whether their assumptions are correct. Relationships deserve that same curiosity. So when you're observing a relationship with somebody, ask yourself, what assumption am I making? What story am I telling myself? Is there another possible explanation? And asking what story you are telling yourself is so important because you could be self-narrating the wrong story. Maybe a family member didn't call you back because they really don't care that it's urgent that they have to return your Pyrex. Or maybe they are dealing with something that you don't know about. Maybe a vendor is not ignoring your request, Maybe expectations were never clearly communicated. Or, in a case I once had, they weren't calling me back or responding to my emails because they stepped away from the office due to a death in the family. It had nothing to do with me. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, whose research on human judgment earned him the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, and he discovered that our brains often rely on shortcuts when making decisions. And in his book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, Kahneman explained that these mental shortcuts allow us to make decisions quickly, but they can also cause us to reach conclusions before we have all the information. We see a pattern, we create a story, and we assume we understand the situation. But sometimes we are solving the wrong problem because we are missing important information. And that's why questioning a relationship matters. Before deciding that someone is difficult, careless, or disrespectful, we can pause and ask, what information might I be missing? A mathematician does not assume the first solution is correct. We always check it, we test it, we examine the conditions, we look for evidence. And you and I can do the same thing with the relationships in our lives. Before you decide you understand the problem, question the relationship. Make sure you are solving the right problem and respond with compassion because you don't know the whole truth. Okay. 3, change one variable. The third step is to experiment by changing one variable. Just one. We can't control other people. We can't force someone to communicate differently or respond the way you want them to, but you can change your own contribution to the relationship. And there are a lot of things you can do here. You can change the way you communicate, the timing of a conversation, or the question you ask them. Instead of saying, "Why didn't you do this?" you might ask, "What got in the way?" Instead of sending another frustrated email, have a 5-minute conversation. Instead of assuming you know the answer, ask yourself if there's another answer. Tap into your curiosity and ask them with genuine interest. Psychologist B.F. Skinner's research on operant conditioning explored how behaviors are influenced by the consequences and conditions surrounding them. In his book, it was in 1953, called Science and Human Behavior, Skinner showed that changing the environment or the feedback people receive can influence future behavior. And while human relationships are far more complex than lab experiments, the lesson is valuable. When we change one part of an interaction, we may create the opportunity for a different outcome. So you don't always need to rebuild the relationship overnight. Sometimes one small change can reveal something so important about the other person and about yourself. So here's your Momentum Monday challenge. Choose one relationship in your life that feels stuck or frustrating. Observe the relationship, question that, and then change one variable and see what happens. Diophantus understood something that applies far beyond mathematics. The solution is not often found in one piece of information alone. The solution is found in understanding how different pieces connect, like a puzzle. And the same is true of the relationships we build with the people around us. So, the next time you face a frustrating interaction, instead of asking, "What is wrong with them?" ask yourself, "What relationship am I creating here?" Because every day, whether we realize it or not, we are solving relationship equations. Thank you for listening to Momentum Monday. And until next time, carpe diem. Oh, and if you want the sources, check them out in the show notes below and in the show notes on the podcast. Again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And until next time, carpe diem.